On this week's episode, we talk about Netflix beginning tests of its cloud gaming service, what Starfield sales might mean for day one Gamepass launches, the insane PC requirements for Alan Wake 2, whether the Spider-Man 2 bugs and glitches actually matter, the PS5 Slim's new hardware-based DRM, and more. All that tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. This is the place where PC gaming and console gaming talk combine. The Orange Box Podcast, Episode 3. I am your host, the man whose first portable PC weighed in an extremely portable 42 pounds, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me is the man whose first portable PC was a Nintendo 3DS, my co-host, Justin, better known as I Am Zerika. How you doing today, Justin?
I am doing very well, sir. Very well. It's been an interesting week, but it's overall pretty good though. Like, how are you feeling today?
It's been busy, very busy.
Oh wow.
And it's only going to get busier. The next several days are just packed full of stuff. So, but that's all right because. Well, I'll get to that. I'll get to my stuff once we cover your stuff. So, what stuff have you been playing this week?
Oh man, well, it's been a lot actually. Definitely more than the week before. So, I've been still going with Sekiro. And I for some reason it feels like every time we do these podcasts, I'm stuck at a particular boss or mini boss, and then after I talk about it the following week, I've already beaten it. And the boss I was stuck at before, I got through that boss, and now I'm on another boss where actually this one seems to be a little bit easier. I've only done one attempt and I died, but I seem to have a better understanding on how this mini boss works. So hopefully next week I'll have made more progress. But other games that I've played have been Vampire Survivors, which is sort of a, I guess, sort of reverse bullet hell type of game, but at least for the original game, it was based heavily on Castlevania sprites and stuff like that.
Mm.
But a new update came out recently, and so I've been playing through that. And sort of tying into that, I also played Choo Choo Survivors, which was a Vampire Survivors clone. And it's not it's not as good as Vampire Survivors, but because it is sort of unique because you are a train fighting zombies instead of vampires and other creatures, it's decent enough. But then also actually yesterday I was meeting with an old coworker / friend, and we were playing some games together. We actually played Vampire Survivors co-op, which was the first time I'd ever even known that there was, first time I even tried the co-op. And he had Overcooked 2, and I played that. That was actually kind of interesting. And then we, oh my gosh, I can't remember. I think it was Pathfinder. We played that together, and that was pretty interesting. So definitely more games this week than the previous week before.
All right. Well, yeah, that's always good to have a greater variety of stuff that you get a chance to play. Yeah, mine has been kind of mixed on the number. It's like somewhere in between previous weeks. But one of the main things, well, I guess I should kind of let me back up a little bit. So, of course, I have coming up this Friday, I'm doing my second 24-hour live stream for the Stack Up charity. And so I've been just kind of trying to knock out some stuff, but also just getting prepared, figuring out what I actually am going to want to play during that stream. And so one of the things that I did remember to record some footage for this time is Outer Wilds. And basically, I'm still just trying to complete that same one achievement because I have a hard time dealing with being one achievement shy of having a complete set of achievements. So I gave that another go, and of course there'll be some footage here. I'll have to mess with that a little bit because the footage that's playing initially is like the beginning of getting to that place, and rather than covering the main part of it. But I definitely want to make sure that I show like the frustration of frustrations that comes with trying to get on that raft just right and making sure that I actually like properly get going with it. But additionally, of course, I've been continuing to play Red Dead Redemption 2. I played probably more of that on my desktop than I did on my Steam Deck, although I did play some on my Steam Deck as well. And, it's still just kind of slowly plugging away at it. I will say, the more I play of Red Dead Redemption 2, the more I miss certain things about Red Dead Redemption 1. Like, this game obviously looks like 100 times better than the first game. And a lot of the like combat and stuff, well, maybe not so much the combat, but there are just a lot of aspects that are definitely like quality of life improvements over the first game. But the one thing, if I have like one major complaint about this game, it's the fact that there's less music. Because as a lot of open world games do now, it follows the trend of having more quiet when you're traversing around and everything, as opposed to just having music playing all the time, even if it's lower volume. And the first game had music playing basically all the time, and just the soundtrack was fantastic. And it seems like whenever I actually hear the music in this game, it's really good. It's just that I don't get to hear it all that often, so that's been a little bit disappointing for me, and it's definitely made it less memorable than the first game was for me, because the first game, it was just like, being out in the desert and everything, riding around, the long rides, but then you'd have that, music playing that just fits so well with the game, and it was just like, it was peaceful. I don't know how to explain it, but anyway, even still, I'm enjoying the game overall. I know that there's zero chance that I'll be done with it even by the time I'm done with my 24-hour live stream, unless I played just that, and I'm not going to. But then the game that I played a lot of over the past several days or so, it has been actually, wait, I'm gonna come to that one last second to last. Last week I had talked about the other game that I'd bought on Switch during a sale, a game called Motto Anomalies. And previously, the understanding I had was that it was Persona-like, but having actually played it a bit, it's really not. If anything, it reminds me a little bit more of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. And I don't know if you played that one at all. I had gotten it on Wii U, and I played a decent chunk, but never finished it. And then I got it when it came out on Switch and played through the whole game. But it reminds me a little bit more of that. But then it also just kind of has... It's like it doesn't have a firm identity of what it actually is, if that makes sense. Like, it has different types of gameplay. Like, it'll have some of the dungeon crawling type elements to it, with turn-based fighting. But then outside of when you're not in this other world or whatever, when you are in like the main world, you'll do these things that have you basically doing like a card battling thing, where it's like turn-based card battle, and then it feels more visual novel in some spots. Like I said, it's just kind of weird, and the gameplay is not going to show all of that because I just kind of recorded a moment in time, but I did it all as recording overhead for the Switch OLED screen, so there was that. But in addition to playing that, the other game that I played a lot of on Switch is Unsold. And this one will also be recorded overhead. I tried to get a lot more gameplay this time, a lot more of the action than I had previously, but I really, really enjoyed the game. And I actually technically finished it. So I think that I should say I'm not entirely 100% sure that it's finished, because I've heard some people say that it is one that you're intended to play more than one time. But I went back into the game, and you can do a regular new game, or you can continue and do chapter select, to get like remaining collectibles and that sort of thing, upgrades, all that. But like when I went back to chapter select, starting from the very beginning, I didn't really get any indicator that it actually was, that it was like continuing in any sort of way. It's not like in Hades where, when you get through the whole thing and you die, you go back to the beginning, but it continues the story forward. It's more like you get to the end of the story, credits roll, and then you can either continue and do chapter select, or you can start a new game. And there's not really any indication of it being connected otherwise, so I don't know. Either way, it's a really, really fun game. I was playing on the easiest of the 3 difficulties, so I've contemplated playing some more on like at least normal difficulty rather than going up to basically the Souls-like difficulty. But I had a good time with it, and it was $4, so it's even better. But I think that it probably was less than 10 hours it took me to finish the whole game. Probably a lot less than that. Probably closer to like 5 or 6 hours. It's pretty short, but it's really good, and I love the art style, and combat feels good. It's a lot more fluid than like Dark Souls, that sort of thing. But then the last thing I played, I got early access on Ghost Runner 2. So I was playing that both on Steam Deck and on PC. The video footage that is going to be shown here is all Steam Deck footage. It can get up to 60 frames per second, but it's not as consistent necessarily, and so I basically just ended up capping it at 40, doing 40 hertz refresh rate and capping it at 40, and that was kind of a good compromise. I did not try it with the default settings that they had it when I booted it up, because the default settings were on low, and I wanted to at least bump up some of the textures to make it look a little better, because it just... I wanted it to look better than like the Switch version of Ghost Runner 1 looked. and it was, low settings, it was kind of borderline on that. I don't think it was quite as bad as the Switch version of the first game, but and of course the Switch version looked bad and only ran at 30 frames per second. But yeah, I've been able to get a pretty consistent 40 FPS on the Steam Deck version. When playing on Steam Deck. Occasionally I can get up above that, and there have been a couple times with some recent levels where there's just like a lot going on in the background in terms of a draw distance and everything, because it didn't actually have a setting for adjusting the draw distance, which was unusual, but where it actually dropped down into like the 20s, which was not good. But it was also like there wasn't a lot of enemies attacking or anything, so it was technically playable. I don't know. I might mess around with the settings some more, but in general, I'll be playing it more on my desktop. And I did play it some on my desktop and was able to get mostly high settings and 120 frames per second. So, quite happy with that. I played a little bit for my last test stream that I did last night before my big 24-hour thing this Friday. So, but either way, everything I played about it, it's great. They've definitely made some quality of life improvements over the first game, and as much as I love the first game, like absolutely love it, this one I can already tell is probably going to be a better game, just from the quality of life stuff that they've done. Most notably of which is the fact that they actually have real checkpoints and levels. Like previously, the way the game is set up is you have checkpoints, but once you exit the level, like if you close out the game, you come back to it. It takes you back to the very beginning of the level. And I mean, when I played it on Switch, it wasn't really a problem because whenever if I died at a certain point, I'd still be at the checkpoint. I just turn off the Switch, turn it back on, just in sleep mode. So easy enough to get back where I was. Or playing on Steam Deck, same thing. But when I'm switching between the Steam Deck and PC, not having to worry about losing all that progress means, like, if I don't finish a level, I don't have to worry about going back and redoing everything. So that's really helpful. But anyway, lots of good stuff. The game officially will be out on the 26th, which is tomorrow from the date of recording, and will already be out by the time this comes out, the podcast. So, but yeah, definitely a great game for people who are fans of the first one. But yeah, that's all I have as far as games I've been playing.
Nice, definitely. I still need to go back and finish the first Ghost Runner. Like I've played a little bit of it, and I definitely enjoyed what I played, but I just never went and finished it though.
Yeah, I mean it's well worth it. It's a challenging game, but I feel like it's challenging but fair, because if you die, you can restart instantly. There's no loading times, nothing like that. It's just like you instantly can restart from where you died, or rather from the beginning of the checkpoint. So it's completely fair from that standpoint. And yeah, I mean that one was interesting on Switch, to say the least. But I did finish it there. And then when I played it on PC, it's like there's no going back. Although, because of how much I loved the game and how much I wanted to support it, I did buy the physical version on Switch after I played it on PC, because I just wanted to support the developers. Plus, having the cartridge, it's just kind of the novelty of it all. So, yeah. But anyway, anything else before we get into news?
No. I think we named everything we did. Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, so getting into the news. First of all, Netflix we've heard in the past that Netflix was going to be doing a cloud gaming service, and they've already previously launched limited trials in both Canada and the UK, and now they're starting to do it in the US. I mean, I know that they've already had like some like indie titles come to their service to where you could actually play them through like a Netflix gaming app that you get to through the Netflix app, something to that effect. I never did it myself. I just heard about it. But yeah, what do you think about all this?
I'm very I mean, I know what Netflix claims. Like they said, it's not supposed to be a competitor to something like console games that's supposed to replace it, but just something extra. And they even mentioned that this is going to be something that they're going to aim towards streamers, especially with a lot of that. And I also know that they did mention that they're going to focus a whole lot on making games of their shows, so different IPs. That's like right, yeah. Stranger Things, Squid Game, and then other IPs of their original series. But they have also mentioned that they're doing something for Grand Theft Auto, which is something that is it's a licensed thing, so I wouldn't I definitely don't think it's gonna be something like, oh, GTA 6 is going to be Netflix exclusive.
Streaming only.
Oh gosh, I can streaming only. Oh goodness.
Yeah.
But I can imagine though that they might maybe be doing something like that, where they might be going to other companies and licensing and making their own sort of games. And also, it wasn't stated what type of game this is, whether it's something that is, I guess, more casual than your typical GTA game. So if they might be doing something like that, sort of how Ubisoft, when with like older mobile phones, they had their own sort of, this is the console version of Assassin's Creed. Here is the mobile phone version of Assassin's Creed. So I don't know if it's gonna be. I mean, I'm not saying it's like mobile phone quality, but it's not going to be something that's just like you would expect, like the same quality of a. So maybe it's something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, also, I don't know if these are things that are going to be solely exclusive for Netflix. I mean, their licensed games, like not licensed, but the ones based on their shows, I have a feeling those are most likely going to be exclusive to Netflix. But as far as with licensing, because they might even say, hey, we're going to go to someone like Activision, go to EA, go to Warner Brothers Interactive, Take-Two is GTA, but something like that, they could possibly go and just do more stuff like that. So I don't know. I'd have to see more. Like, personally, I'm not interested in this because it just isn't for me. I'm not really one of streaming games, just because for one thing, need to have a constant internet connection, make sure it's also good so that you don't get lag, you don't have all of these hiccups. But then also, it's just another thing. It's like, I don't own the game, and it's at the mercy of a server. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very in a very similar position to you. I have tested out streaming games before. Really, I literally just did demos. Like I tried doing Control on Switch. Did the streaming demo of that. It looked good. It ran decently, but I also had fast internet and was playing at home. I still never would purchase a game that way, or just rely on doing that in general. But for if I'm streaming from my PC to something, that's fine. I mean, I've done that. I've actually streamed a fair amount, going from my PC to either using my Steam Link in the living room or using the Steam Link app on my phone, or times when I can't properly stream a game directly through Steam on the Steam Deck. I'll use the Steam Link application. Grab something 1 second. I have this grip thing that goes on my phone, and actually maybe I'll just even show what it looks like while I'm talking, if I can do two things at once. And it works quite well. I mean, this particular one that I got actually has larger sticks instead of having the Switch size Joy-Con sticks, but it it works pretty nicely for streaming a variety of games. And yes, it's not the ideal way to play. Most of the time I would rather just play something natively on Steam Deck or whatever, but there have been times, for example, when I would be, so there's how it is. Okay. It's got, I mean, the sticks are good size and everything. It's, it got not full size buttons and all that stuff. It works pretty nicely. But when my wife and I are both wanting to play Diablo 4 at the same time, so she'll be playing natively on the Steam Deck, and then I'll just stream it to my phone, and I get the version that looks a little prettier, and they both run at 60 frames per second, so it works out nicely for both of us. Yeah, it's in general, the idea of streaming, I think it can be good, but I wouldn't ever want it to be exclusively that. If I'm running the game in my house off of my own hardware, then it's one thing. But if I'm running it from some remote server, I'm not about that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point about that differentiation, because if you're streaming from your own hardware, that's a completely separate thing, and that's something that you own. You can do whatever, and also, I would imagine that you would sort of have better connection from your PC to your phone or other device, as opposed to from a remote server somewhere to your home internet.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes a huge difference, and I mean, streaming from my PS4 has been kind of iffy for the most part. It can work to some degree. Like last year, I think. Actually, it was the last time I did the stack up stream. I was technically streaming Uncharted, the first Uncharted game for my PS4 to my Steam Deck. But all I was really doing was I was using the Steam Deck so that I would have gyro aiming for the game, and then I was playing the game on my computer screen. So I had, my PS4 connected to my monitor so that there wasn't any latency in terms of the picture, and then having the Steam Deck, I could make use of the gyro for aiming, which made such a huge difference, especially playing on the highest difficulty. And I guess technically it isn't the highest difficulty anymore because they added an additional difficulty for the collection, but crushing is still very difficult. Anyway, all that being said, as an overall thing, I think we'll have to see what exactly Netflix does. At least some of the games that they've been doing, like games like Oxenfree, which they purchased the developer, I think a couple years ago. Things like that, and the games that they do in general, which tend to be more like turn-based type games, the kind of games that don't require quick reflexes. I could see that working just fine. Just not like the big, AAA crazy games. That's just insane. I can't imagine trying to do that. All right, any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next topic?
Nope, I think I'm good.
All right, so we got a pretty surprising bit of information, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but Circana, which is formerly known as NPD, released their sales charts for September of 2023, as well as the overall sales charts for this year. And for the dates from August 27th through September 30th, 2023, we had Starfield in the number one sales slot. And for people who say, oh, well, it was just September, it was actually, September, yes, it was the only month where it was at the top of the sales, but it still made the top 10, being at number 7 most sold game for the year so far. So from January 1st through November 30th, it is number 7 in the top, in the sales charts, top 20 sales charts. So it's pretty impressive. And when you look at the games that it outsold for September on its own, it outsold Mortal Kombat 1, which was multi-platform. Yeah. It sold EA Sports FC, which I'm assuming is Football Club. I think that they stopped. They didn't want to renew the FIFA license because it was too expensive, so they just changed the name of the game. But those are especially that EA Sports and Madden. NBA 2K24. Some of these other ones have been out for quite a while, but still, number one seller for the month of September. And okay, so this in and of itself, whatever, not that big of a deal. But what makes this so significant is the fact that Starfield was also a day one Game Pass release. And yes, there was the option to purchase the premium edition, which would make it so that people would actually be able to get early access to the game and be able to play it on September 1st instead of having to wait until September 6th, which was the official release date, and the point when it actually came to Game Pass for everybody with just the normal monthly fee. But it's still, this is actual copies sold. This isn't just people playing the game. It sold better than any other game in the month of September, despite the fact that people could get it on Game Pass without having to spend anything extra. And this is counting both PC and Xbox. This doesn't count PC Game Pass, because the PC Game Pass stuff are through the Microsoft launcher, which is separate from Steam, and this is only counting Steam sales. And as far as I can tell, it's not counting any other sellers on PC. I'm not sure if it counts any like third-party like key sellers like Green Man Gaming, things like that. Because like I got my copy through Green Man Gaming because it was like 20% off for the early access version, so saved quite a bit of money for being able to play early. But so, what do you think this means when it comes to the whole idea that games coming to Game Pass day one means that they're not going to sell?
I mean, it definitely throws a huge wrench into the plans of anyone who says, games are going to flop if they're going to be owned. I mean, you definitely have those fanboys out there who say, Xbox gamers don't buy their games, They only just want to play their games on Game Pass. But the fact that this game sold out so well, and the fact that it beat out Mortal Kombat 1, which, is a big, heavy hitter. I mean, I would say that's, even considering the fact that you have Madden and you have Football Club, which, maybe because it loses its licensed name, some people might not care as much. Some people, probably still are huge FIFA fans and are saying, despite the name, we still love the game. We're going to buy the game anyway. But I still think that Mortal Kombat is the biggest title out of all of those. And the fact that Starfield beat that game really speaks volumes. And, it also makes you wonder, well, what's going to happen when Elder Scrolls 6 comes out?
Right.
I mean, and I don't know. I mean, the fact that there's so much. I mean, Microsoft really promoted this game. They really advertised it well, and so I think that really did a huge. That really helped them out. But I think the fact that I don't know. I just think the fact that people really wanted this game and were so. They really just wanted to play this game, so they didn't even care about, getting on Game Pass. They said, despite the fact that's going to be a Game Pass day one, I just want to get the game. And, I don't even know how many people got the early access issue, but I do know that a lot of people were buying that version. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's, like, enough people that really, that was the majority of people bought the early access edition, but I still think that people were so hyped for the game. They didn't care. They just wanted to get the game when it came out, and they probably were like, "Yeah, you know what? It's a Bethesda game. We've enjoyed Bethesda games. We've enjoyed Fallout. We've enjoyed Elder Scrolls. So this is going to be another game that don't care if it's on Game Pass. Add it to the collection of games that they own."
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you really can't. I mean, it's hard to say at this point that Game Pass is legitimately that negative of an impact. I mean, it's like the same people who say that piracy is the reason games don't sell as well. And the reality is that the people who are pirating games, we're going to pirate the game regardless. It's not just because, it's easy or whatever. Most of the time, it's just people would rather pirate the game than purchase it, or they want to avoid DRM, whatever the reason. And the same goes with this. There's a lot of people who have the option to just go through Game Pass, and some people, they just want to own the game.
How's the investigation?
And I mean, without a doubt, there was definitely people who were doing the early access thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure that
staffing problems. I'm still
they said in the first weekend, and I can't remember if this was
seems to be turning around.
early access weekend or if it was the first weekend after the official release, but they were up to like 6 million players across all platforms. And of course that number was including Game Pass. We don't know the actual sales numbers for Starfield so far, but still the fact that it was number one is significant. I mean, I personally am not sure if Mortal Kombat is as big of a seller as it was like when I was a kid. But honestly, I stopped following Mortal Kombat after like Mortal Kombat 3. So I don't know how big of a seller it still is. Yeah, but it does have the multi-platform aspect, the fact that it's on basically everything, Switch.
Back to work.
But the thing about Starfield is the fact that it did sell well enough to where it was included in all of this.
Yeah. And, oh gosh, because you did mention something that is like a definitely good point. I mean, I would say that Mortal Kombat still, even despite the fact that, it was huge, I think the fact that it somehow, in a sense, got bigger because for the past few games, like, I don't know, maybe past 3 games or so, they've started to incorporate, and this is also something that other games have done as well, but they've incorporated other characters from other franchises into the games to like boost those DLC sales and also those pre-orders. Like for this recent one, they included Omni-Man from Invincible. They included Homelander from The Boys. So getting into that modern pop culture superhero stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that that also sort of helps with pre-orders and other stuff like that. So I do think that it does still have that major relevancy that arguably is about the same, maybe even slightly more so than it was back in like the arcade days. So I still think that this is nothing to just to overlook, especially the fact that I didn't address this, but the fact that you mentioned it was the fact that Monster Hunter Mortal Kombat 1 is completely multi-platform for every system, and as you mentioned, the Nintendo Switch, which I completely forgot about because I'm thinking about that game running on there. But
Yeah.
the fact that it's everywhere, and this is only for Xbox and PC, it really speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, and kind of getting back to the whole idea of Game Pass. So a lot of people really do think that the Game Pass is detrimental to game sales, that people are not going to purchase games if they can get them on Game Pass, but this has already shown that that's not necessarily the case. Now, it's not going to happen with every single game. I mean, look at games like Forza, which recent Forza just came out, and then there was another one, another recent Xbox release, and I can't remember which one it was. Redfall. Both of those were day one Game Pass, and even with that being the case, they definitely didn't sell anywhere near as well as Starfield. Starfield has, of course, the brand recognition of Bethesda, having been, developed these massive games over the years and everything else. And sure, there's plenty of people who have had, and there's been very mixed reactions to Starfield. I get it. Nope, that's fine. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people think it's very mid. I can definitely understand how a lot of people have said that it's kind of like a jack of all trades and a master of none. That it does lots of things and does them reasonably well, but nothing to really stand out. And I can definitely understand that and even agree to some extent. But the fact of the matter is that Starfield has sold this well. We don't know exactly how many copies it's sold, but it's sold well enough to be at the top of the sales charts and in the top 10 of the sales charts for the entire year, only covering a single month of sales. Now, where it's going to be at the end of the year, my guess is it's probably not going to move up much more than that. I would assume that probably as time goes on and it goes on sale, then it will start selling better, and it'll be kind of like Skyrim, where it'll be sort of an evergreen title, not to the extent of like Nintendo games like Mario Kart, which is, I think, was still in the top, is number 15 in the top 20 for the year, and Mario Kart 8 came out, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out in 2017. And then for, let's see here, I think, what did it say for September? Oh no, that was 15 for just September, and in the top, where is it in the top 20? Oh, it's number 20 in the top 20 for the whole year. But even still, point is that it very much is a situation where you can't you can't say necessarily that Game Pass is going to harm these sales. And kind of going back to my point about like how it compares with the idea of piracy and everything. So, emulation. That is how I got introduced to some of my favorite games of all time. Like, particularly Chrono Trigger. The first time I played that was through an emulator. A lot of the earlier Final Fantasy games, that's how I played them for the first time. And as a result, I ended up buying those games. In some cases, several times. And it's because of how much I love those games. And I think that the thing about Game Pass that can be really great is it can introduce people to new games. And while, yeah, there are definitely plenty of people who they'll play it on Game Pass, they'll never come back to it, even if they enjoy it. There are also some people who they'll try it on Game Pass, decide that they really like it, and they decide that they want to buy it. And a lot of it's probably going to depend on like where you're at in life, the kind of money you have available. Like, I wasn't buying a whole lot of games when I was younger because I didn't have money. Then I started working and actually having consistent income and everything and could afford to purchase games all the time. And so I do that. And typically now, because my attitude is I would rather own a game or as close to owning a game as possible, given the digital age, I'll buy it. I don't subscribe to Game Pass because I don't see the point for me personally when I already have literally hundreds of games that I could play without ever going into their library, and for me it would just be wasted money. But for people who don't have that vast library of games, it makes sense. Game Pass makes a lot of sense. But it's also not preventing people from buying games day one. Or, even just wanting to buy them in general. It's not going to stop people from buying the games, even without a discount. And the fact is that there were a lot of people who bought the early access version because they wanted to play this game that much. And Starfield, despite being an unknown property, sold this well. Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be insane. And we already know, at least as the last thing we heard, is that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be an Xbox and PC exclusive, which is great for us because we're PC gamers. Great for Xbox gamers, and the reality is that it will be developed entirely by Xbox, because basically all they did was like some very early concept stuff before they got acquired, and everything else will be under Microsoft's ownership, under their leadership and them paying for everything. So makes sense. But this also kind of brings up another interesting point. So we can see now that Xbox has been releasing their games day one on PC for a long time. It's been at least a few years that they've been doing that, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I may be remembering wrong, but honestly, things kind of blur together sometimes. A lot of PlayStation fans have been saying that, and I'm not just talking about the fanboys, I'm talking about fans and fanboys. Two different things in my opinion. I've been saying that if Sony starts selling their games day one on PC, same day as it releases on PlayStation, that it's going to devalue those games, and that those games are not going to sell as well. Now, I personally am of the opinion that that is not true at all. I've been of the opinion of that for a long time, and I think this situation shows that the game can still sell well. In fact, it will probably sell even better if they release it day one on PC, because of the simple fact that you have a whole new group of people who are not going to buy your console anyway, ready and willing to buy it on PC. And they'll buy it day one because they want to support that practice. Now, of course, whether or not there will be issues with that day one version, that's a different question. But it's still, this has shown you, like Starfield, the PC version is not as good as the let me back up. That's not accurate. Saying that Starfield is not as well optimized on PC to where it has enough consistency versus the Xbox version, even though it's only 30 frames per second, is more consistent in how it's optimized because they were focused when they developed it on making it run well on the Xbox because they knew that's where it was going to be. Probably that's where their primary player base was going to be. And, you know, like I've been saying for years, I firmly believe, especially now that we've seen what Starfield did, that if PlayStation starts releasing their games on PC day one, they're going to see a huge growth in sales. And I'm not just talking like a little bit here and there. I'm talking about probably millions in general. Yes, there are definitely plenty of people out there who have a PS5 and have a PC. They'll buy the game on PS5 and then down the line they'll buy it again on PC. But then there are plenty of PC gamers that they don't want to buy a PS5. Whether because they are like thoroughly against the practice of exclusives in general and they just don't want to buy PlayStation for that purpose, or because they're like me and just are kind of done buying consoles and having to buy a game more than once. You know, when I could just buy the game one time and never have to buy it again. But anyway, I kind of rambled on there for a bit. So what are your further thoughts now that I've gotten into all that stuff?
Yeah, and you actually you brought, well, sort of, one point definitely was relevant. The other one sort of, I'm gonna splinter off of that. So I want to backtrack to the fact that I mentioned about Game Pass and about how people are introduced to games. And it's very funny because the friend I mentioned earlier who I met up with yesterday, for the longest time, he had never played any sort of indie games, and, you know, he primarily was playing big AAA games and maybe some AA games, but through Game Pass, he actually experienced indie games for the first time, and he realized, hey, these are actually not so bad, you know, and I was like, yeah, indie games can be great. They can be just as good, and, you know, depending on what game it is, even better than these, or at least as far as like the quality of the games, the effort that's put into the games, better than these larger, bigger AAA class games. So for someone like that, I think that Game Pass definitely does provide that value because you can either get into genres, like for example, say you're someone who plays more action-based games, you might try something that's more turn-based, or you might try a completely different genre, like a puzzle game, or something else. Like, I definitely see that value there for someone who really only plays one type of game, or just a few types of games, and has never touched anything else. You can try something else that's new and different, and see how that goes. So I do agree with your point there about how, for someone who has a lower budget, that definitely is useful for them, or someone who just doesn't really do much doesn't play many variety of games. But sort of splashing off to your other topic about something interesting about about the precedent this sets is sort of different. And I know for you this will definitely be different because you use Green Man Gaming and got a discount. Mm-hmm. But the precedent this sets is that this is a big selling game, and it was $70 price tag. And we do know that Microsoft did say that future larger games are going to be $70 instead of the $60 that they have been. But I'm wondering, though, what sort of precedent this will set for other... Excuse me for a second. Sorry. But I'm just wondering what sort of precedent that might set for other developers. I mean, we do know that Sony has their own $70 games. We do know that EA has $70 games, and Activision has a couple of... I think that the latest Call of Duty was $70. Mm-hmm. But I'm just wondering, sort of, is that going to sort of inspire more more publishers to say, hey, you know, maybe we can, you know, raise our prices to $70 as well. Now, again, like a lot of PC gamers, like you, you got your games from third party, or not third party, but from other key sites where you get those good discounts. So you're actually getting a good deal on that stuff. But for a lot of people, like for example, say on Xbox, who don't have those like other sellers, who buy it for $70, do you think that could impact how games are being sold as far as like the price goes?
Well, to be honest, I really think that that's already changed. Now, that's not to say that it's changed with everyone, but AAA games, yeah, I mean they're already going to go that route. The only reason Nintendo hasn't done it with more of their games yet is because they haven't had a good excuse. The excuse they had with Tears of the Kingdom, releasing that at $70, was because they had to use a larger cartridge because of the size of the game files. It was bigger than the 16 gigabyte cartridge, and so that was their excuse. And obviously they were definitely testing the waters with that, but they haven't done any $70 games since then. Of course, you can bet without any doubt whatsoever, at least in my mind, that the next gen Switch's games are going to be $70. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. Sony started the precedent, and it's just going to continue. And of course, Starfield sold extremely well. A lot of other games have sold extremely well. I mean, Call of Duty has been doing $70, and they're still selling. But yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, basically console gamers pay the console tax. It's what they're doing. They're paying extra for the convenience of having a box that doesn't require any extra effort. Now, of course, they don't recognize that even though it doesn't technically require extra effort, you also can't put in the extra effort if you're not happy with how the game runs, which is one of the benefits of PC gaming. But yeah, I think that we're already past that point. It's the $70 is what's going to stick with it, and I think that every major publisher developer is going to do $70 unless it's a shorter game that they can get away, or that they don't think they can get away with it, or like a smaller developer. Like as an example, Ghost Runner 2. They just did. They had the early access version, which came out 2 days early. The early access version though also comes with the season pass, which, based on the quality of the DLC that they released for the last game, specifically the single player story DLC that takes place before the main game, I thought it was worth it. And it's like, okay, early access plus the season pass, that's worth the $70. And that was $70 for that top tier version. And then with the Green Man Gaming discount, I got I think 18% off or something like that. So it was 56, something like that. So it was cheaper, but then you have Sony. They're going to keep releasing all their games at $70, their first party titles, maybe with the exception of some regular remasters. If it's a smaller remaster, they might not do that. But of course, then we had Last of Us Part 1, which they call a remake, charge $70 for it. Most likely, the same thing's going to happen when they do the Last of Us Part 2 remaster, remake, whatever they're going to call it. The only thing they might not do it with Bloodborne whenever that eventually makes its way over to PS5 and gets that 60 frames per second update, but theoretically they wouldn't have to do a whole lot with that visually, although they'd probably try to force ray tracing like they have with Spider-Man. And I don't know. Yeah, they'll force ray tracing. It'll still be, so you'll still have the option to play at 30 frames per second with ray tracing, or they'll maybe they'll do just regular 60 frames mode. I don't know. I'm not going down that rabbit hole right now. But yeah. All of that, just kind of going back to the main topic with this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do not think Game Pass harms game sales as much as people think it does. And I think that it's actually more helpful than people realize. Whether or not it's profitable, that's something we can't know for sure, apart from what Microsoft says. I know a lot of people do not believe it's profitable. I think that there's a lot of factors that aren't considered, and I think they underestimate how many people spend a lot more money on Game Pass than they would spend on actually buying games if they were buying games. But that's just my thought on the matter. Anything further you want to talk about with that?
No, I'm good.
All right, so speaking of PC, we just got the requirements for Alan Wake 2. And hoo boy, that is yet another recent example of a game that is... The requirements are insane. So let me just kind of go over the requirements here for the different resolutions, and I might actually just go ahead and share my screen on this one. Let's make that.
Man.
There we go. Okay, so for the minimum requirements, low graphics preset, 1080p 30 frames per second. You need a GeForce RTX 2060, 6 gigs of VRAM, which, well, really, so technically, if you use something else, it just has to have that minimum amount of VRAM. And you have to have DLSS or FSR enabled. An i5 7600K or AMD equivalent for your CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, and 90 gigs for your storage, 90 gigs across the board, of course. The recommended medium settings for 1080p 60, you need to have a RTX 3070. You still have to have DLSS or FSR enabled, 16 gigs of RAM, and then when you get into ultra settings for 4K 60, you need an RTX 4070 with with DLSS or FSR, 16 gigs of RAM. And the fact that you need a 30 series card for 1440p, 30 frames per second. This game is not optimized. It is not optimized at all, and legitimately, like, I don't understand this. So it is an Unreal Engine 5 game. I do want to point that out. And this is not the first example of an Unreal Engine 5 game that is not well optimized. Now, I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that Alan Wake 2 will not run at 60 on PS5 or Series X. It's probably only going to be 30 FPS there, and I could be wrong on that front, but I can't imagine unless... I mean, if they have it running at 60 on these systems, even though we know, of course, obviously, it's not going to look as pretty, I mean, it still looks really good. Like, it is legitimately one of the best looking games that they've made, and I mean, Remedy has continually pushed the boundaries of what they can do with each system. Even if the first Alan Wake has not held up well visually, but like, you look at Control, of course, which was their most recent game, looks incredible. I mean, it is a beautiful looking game. Or, before that, what's the other one? I have it in my Steam library. It was the one that was an Xbox exclusive.
It's not
Quantum Break.
Yeah,
Quantum Break. I mean, that one still looks good. Now, I haven't played that one yet. I do have it. I haven't bought it. I mean, I haven't played it yet, but yes, this studio makes really good-looking games, and they push the hardware. But this is just... The problem with these things is that right now, games like this, games like what was the other one? It's another Unreal Engine 5 game. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
One that's coming out, or one that
it's one that came out pretty recently. It's like a first-person magic game. And it's on the tip of my brain. It's one that I was actually like really interested in playing too. I'll just bring up my wish list here. But okay. Immortals of Avium, that's the name of it. So that's another one where it is, and it's possible that by this point they fixed it. I'm not aware of them having fixed it, but it's something that is also very poorly optimized for PC. Then you have a game which is not Unreal Engine 5, which is, for some reason, I'm spacing on names of these games. It's the one that was on PlayStation exclusively and PC, with the very overly chatty girl that is obnoxious.
Oh gosh, Unspoken.
Forspoken.
Forspoken.
Yes, Forspoken. I wish it was
Unspoken.
I think we have the title for our Unspoken. Just do a picture of her with duct tape over her mouth. Perfect. Thank you for giving me a good title for this episode. All right. Yeah, so Forspoken, another example of a game that required way too much for the quality of the visuals and everything else. And I believe that they fixed some of that since then. Because that game did come out early this year, I'm pretty sure is when it was. But yeah, the reality is that we have these games that are coming out. They're not optimized at all for PC. They're just, well, Starfield's even an example. I don't think Starfield's quite as crazy, but the fact is that it should run way better than it does on PC. There's no reason why it shouldn't be running significantly better, especially on NVIDIA cards. I think it runs better on AMD cards, but it's not well optimized. And there's so many of these games that are coming out that are just so poorly optimized. And these developers, whether it's because they're lazy or it's because they just run into deadlines, my guess is I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's more the latter, that they're running into deadlines. They have to focus on the console versions because those are the ones that are going to get, that are more difficult to release in a broken state. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is just another piece of this ever-growing puzzle that because we've had so many games, and the fact that you have, and I know that this again is also a card that's been out for, I don't know, maybe at least 7 years or so, but still, a 2060 as a minimum card and only getting 30 FPS.
Right.
With DLSS or FSR enabled. And the fact that, and this is another thing, is the fact that initially I thought, DLSS and FSR, especially once, 2.0 came out and was better, I thought, this is great. This is actually a pretty good thing to help older cards, especially people who, don't have enough money yet saved up to get newer parts. So if they're, say, on a GTX 1070 card or something like that, AMD equivalent, something like that, it's good for people who have older cards to be able to still be able to play these newer games with a decent frame rate and yet still have pretty decent quality visually wise. I mean, it's not, completely native, but the fact that now it's just being used as a crutch to get these games to run well, or not even well, just decently, like just performing at 60 FPS, using a 3070, which is it's from the last generation, but that is a high quality card. Like, it's a high quality card. It's not like it's a mid-range card. It's not like it's a low budget card. This is a 3070 is a pretty decent card. Yeah. The fact that it's only recommend it's recommended for 1080p 60 fps. That is it's not even ultra, it's just the recommended. That is insulting to me. And also still, you need to have DLSS. That's still the setting, DLSS. So DLSS and FSR are crutches because they say, oh, well, if you use this, the game will run fine. The game shouldn't need that.
Right.
These cards should be perfectly well and pretty capable to have the games run well, have these graphic settings, and not have that should be able. The DLSS and FSR should be, if we went to either, maybe peak past something which we wouldn't normally do, like say if we're running at 1440p, maybe get 4K and still have roughly the same amount of frames per second, or for even a lower card, maybe getting to something like 1440p from 1080p, or if we just want to keep what we have, but then maybe just increase our frame rate. So say if we're at 60, we want to get something like 90. I don't know, something like that. But the fact that you need this, that this is a requirement to get the game to work, that's inexcusable. That's completely inexcusable. That should be something that is if we want to improve what we already have, not to just make the game work in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's... The other thing that baffles me about this is that when you consider the power that you have in the current gen consoles, with Xbox Series X being the most powerful, followed by PS5, neither of these come anywhere near close to those specs. And I don't know for sure if either of them are going to have a performance mode that'll give them 60 frames per second, but it's very obvious that they focused on making the console versions as best as they could, and just basically kind of did as little as they could get away with on PC, so that it would just basically they'd be able to do the bare minimum. And like I said, I am giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, oh, it's more deadlines than anything else. That's the reason why it's not optimized. And hopefully they'll actually take the time to fix the games like this, and various other things. But there's no reason why this should be happening. It's an unfortunate reality, and that is just the current way things are going. And of course, with Alan Wake 2, the fact that it's Epic Games Store exclusive and it's developed by Epic Games, which means it may never actually come over to Steam unless Epic gets desperate and later down the line decides to move the games over, which they could. I mean, they could go the way of both EA and Ubisoft, where they eventually moved their games back over to Steam. But I'm not holding my breath on the matter, and I'm kind of mixed on whether or not I want to play this. And not just because it's an Epic Games. I liked the first Alan Wake. It was definitely creepy, and there were times I was like, nope, I'm going away from this. And this one looks like it's a lot more creepy than the first game. Like, it's legit horror, which makes me not sure whether or not it's something that I want to play. But at the same time, I'd like to have the option, because I did enjoy the first game, and Remedy's kind of had like this connected universe going on with their games. I'm not sure how many of them are connected, but I know at least Alan Wake and Control are connected. And there was some really cool stuff in Control that I came across. I was like, this is awesome! That just really made me happy, having actually played through Alan Wake. But anyway, that all being said, I just, yeah, I think that's about all I need to say on that matter.
Yeah.
But, kind of moving along with a different topic, I'm actually going to do the topics in a slightly different order. So, we're going to talk about some more about the PS5 Slim and some new information that just came out. But first, I do need to issue a correction on what I previously said about the PS5 Slim regarding the stand. So, the vertical stand, as we stated, is in fact a separate purchase that's it's required. I mean, that if you want to stand up your PS5 vertically, you have to purchase this stand, specifically for the PS5 Slim. Where I was wrong is I thought that that the stand also worked for the horizontal, for having the PS5 horizontally, but actually the PS5 Slim has like a little tiny kickstand thing. It looks more tiny than the one on the Switch, but since it's not as oddly balanced as the Switch was with the original kickstand, I'll give them a pass on that. I still think that it's way overpriced for what they're giving you. I think it's bad. Anyway, I'm not going to go back into all that. But I did want to issue that correction. But we did get some news regarding the PS5's new form of DRM. And that is specifically, if you decide to purchase the PS5 Slim digital version with the optional disk drive, the optional disk drive requires an internet connection in order to connect it to the system. So let me just read the article here from Video Games Chronicle. As spotted on the back of the box for the upcoming Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 PS5 Slim bundle, small print confirms that players who purchase the new model with the optional disk drive will be required to connect to the internet when pairing it to a machine for the first time. It's likely that this is a security measure in order to ensure that the disk drive is a legitimate one and not a third party. However, it has raised some preservation concerns. Because the accessory will require an internet connection for verification, there will potentially come a time when the servers needed to verify the license will no longer be operational. It's possible by the time this happens, Sony will release an update that removes the requirement, and in any case, it's likely to be many years in the future, long after the PS5 is Sony's main console. But nevertheless, it's still, and I'm not reading the article anymore. It's definitely an issue. Your thoughts?
Yeah. The major thing definitely would be preservation. Like, if you're someone who goes into, like, say you go into a Goodwill store, I don't know, 15, 20 years in the future, yep. And you see say, hey, I want to do some oh gosh. I'm just imagining saying calling the PS5 a retro game console. Oh gosh. But say you want to go and buy this retro console called the PS5, and you see it.
Well,
and
it is outdated hardware, so yeah. Right, go on.
And you see it, and you see the digital version. You're like, oh, hey, that's cool. And then you go and say, oh, well, they just have this version. I'll go on like eBay and find a disk drive. You buy it, and then you have to connect, and then there's no. It says, oh, we're sorry, we cannot connect to the server to update. And I think that's also another thing that, I mean, it's a completely different topic altogether. I'm not going to dive too deeply into it. What's the problem with everything needing updates? It's the fact that it really makes a lot of electronics inoperable if you don't have them, and that's a very major problem. But without going further there, just with this, it is a problem. Like, and I do understand that Sony does want to, assuming of course that point was also mentioned by the writer of the article. That wasn't an actual direct statement by Sony, but assuming that this is to make sure that's an authentic device. I understand you want to protect your IP and brand and whatnot, but I still think that that's going to really just mostly harm us. And the fact that even it was also mentioned that it could also deter third-party repair shops, which I think that if you're capable of repairing something, you shouldn't need to. You should be able to do it yourself. You shouldn't have to take it to a licensed vendor. Like, sure, if what you do messes up, that's on you. But you should still have that option to repair your own devices however you want. If you want to go take apart your PS5, say, hey, because, the fact that Sony kind of already does that by saying, hey, you can open up your PS5, insert a brand new SSD right in there. Like, I feel like that's the right step to take. Give consumers more control over their own hardware. And that's something I would like to see. But the fact that this is sort of like going a step backwards to the point that saying like, okay, you can put this in here. We're giving you an option that you can upgrade from a digital to a physical with this disk drive. But if you want to do that, you're going to have to update it. That's really taking a lot of control. Like, you really just are forcing people just to go ahead and buy the physical version. Like, you're pretty much just giving that incentive, because why should I buy the digital version? And as you even mentioned, it's more expensive if you buy it the digital with the new Blu-ray drive. There's that. And then another thing that I also read, I'm not sure if it's that same article, but a different one, is the fact that Sony has already stated that after the current PS5 models are sold out, the Slim ones are the only ones that are going to be available.
Yep.
So you will not have that option to get the original digital, or you won't have the option to get the other version. So this is going to be what you're stuck with. So that's another reason why I think that this internet connection requirement is a horrible idea. But that's all just I think, though.
Yeah. So something else that's pointed out later in the article, Wired did a test in 2020, and basically they tried removing the disk drives from 2 launch PS5 consoles and swapping them over, but the consoles would refuse to recognize the other drive despite them being identical hardware. And so my question would be, is what happens if one of these drives is faulty after it's been paired? Will it not recognize it? I mean, I guess... I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. If the drive someone gets a drive for the PS5, it goes faulty, will they have issues with putting in a new drive? I think actually I probably already answered my own question now that I think about it. And probably it would just pair the new drive, but if you tried taking one from a different one that had already been paired to it, an existing PS5, then it wouldn't. So either way, it's not good. But I thought about it and I realized this is basically the equivalent. I mean, not much different from their proprietary memory cards that they use in the PSP and the Vita. The only real difference is that obviously this is not actually storage, but still the fact that basically if you don't have that specific product, you cannot use their system. I don't know. It annoys me that this is happening, and I'm hoping that what Sony will do down the line, whenever they get to the point, when this is a retro console, whatever, they'll remove that requirement. But the problem, of course, comes if someone gets, let's say, something from Goodwill or from a thrift store, whatever, and it doesn't already have that update in there, and the servers are gone, then what? Because if that update's not already there that removed that requirement, then they try to do it and they're not going to be able to at all. Now, perhaps there will be some sort of workaround that people will figure out, some way to hack the system and all that. And most likely by that point, I'm sure someone will have figured out some way to get around this. Just like, how there's a way to use micro SD cards in a Vita. I mean, still, it's just... This DRM stuff is just a nightmare for future preservation. And I know that lots of people are going to defend it, especially the fanboys, and even the fans. A lot of people who won't think about how it's going to affect things in the future. And yeah, it's down the line. It's probably not going to be an issue for a long time, but this seems like it's potentially just a big headache that will happen for people in the future. And I don't know. I don't think I really have anything else to say about that. What about you? Anything else?
No, no. I think I got it all out of me.
All right, so now we're going to get into our last topic of the evening, and this one's kind of more of a partially humorous topic. So, I guess Spider-Man 2, which just came out last week for PS5, has some bugs in it. One of which, sometimes it's small things like people clipping into environments, and there's some screenshots I've seen of like Miles's costume being missing and just being his head, floating head. But then there's this other one where the suit completely disappears, and this can be for either Peter or Miles, and it's just basically a floating cube of what looks like tofu, swinging around on webs and fighting crime and stuff like that. It looks like the kind of thing that you'd see in a PC mod. I guess apparently this is something that also was a glitch sometimes on Miles Morales, which I never came across that. I know that there were glitches occasionally in those games, but it was never anything that was so noticeable to where... it was never anything as noticeable as either of those things. But this brings up the question. How big of a deal are these bugs? Are they really that significant? Now, I think that if like the tofu block thing was like a permanent status going forward, like if from the point that glitch occurred through the rest of the game, they no longer were. They no longer would see the suits, and they'd just be a block of tofu. That would be a big problem. If it's a temporary bug that goes away when you restart the game, whatever, is it? I guess let me bring up a couple other things just related to this. So, when Starfield came out, of course, being a Bethesda game, it has bugs. Seems to have fewer bugs than most Bethesda games, which is something worth noting. But of course, we get into fanboys, and PlayStation fanboys in particular will go and point out every single bug that exists in these Bethesda games, which, in a game that huge, of course, you have bugs. But now you have the Xbox fanboys doing the opposite when it comes to Spider-Man. And I don't know how widespread the bugs are. I don't know if all these things are coming up constantly for a lot of people, or if it's just a small handful of people. But it's obviously happening. And there's been some suggestion that maybe it actually came with the day one patch, that some of these things, that basically in fixing some things, they broke some other things, which does happen. I've definitely seen that happen in other games. Because these bugs were not mentioned in reviews. And yeah, it's also possible that if some of these bugs came up, the reviewers may have either just ignored them or deliberately chose not to mention them. My guess is more ignoring. But if these bugs are not something that are game breaking, and it's not something where the costumes disappearing for the rest of the game and you're just a tofu cube, what is your opinion on how much these bugs actually matter? And we're not just talking about Spider-Man 2, we're talking about Starfield, we're talking about all these different games that are releasing.
I personally, I think it partially depends. Like, I think majorly if it's not something that's going to be game breaking. Like, for example, with the same game, but this occurred with two different versions of what I've played. So, with Batman Arkham Origins, when I played that on the Wii U, there was a section where I would fall directly through the map repeatedly. I couldn't land on the ground, and I even sometimes went through the buildings as well before falling into the ground.
Yeah.
And that completely broke the game. I could not progress. Yeah. Eventually, at some point, it stopped. The glitches stopped, and I was able to play. And so that was fine, but it was annoying. It was because, I couldn't make any progress.
Right.
But when I played it on PC, there's a very weird glitch where in the opening part of the game for just this one brief part of a cutscene leading into the actual gameplay. There's no audio whatsoever. It's weird. I don't know why it's like that, but it's momentary. It's momentary, so I can ignore that and move on.
Yeah.
So if it's something like that with the new Spider-Man game, where it's maybe something that's about 5 to 10 seconds long, and maybe happens once or twice over the span of the entire game, I think that's something that can be ignored. I mean, it definitely sucks to have glitches or have some sort of problems within a game. But I mean, I do understand that, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this game, a lot of different things going on, a lot of, processes going on, a lot of calculations by the game that's being done with the background, with NPCs, with the environment. So I do understand that there's a lot to that. So I do understand that you're not going to be able to cut out glitches 100%. So if it's something that's very minimal like this, I think it's something that can be ignored, especially if it doesn't impact the game. And even going back, like, there was a game I played on the GameCube called Bionicle Heroes. I don't know if this impacted the PS2 or Xbox version, but in the GameCube version, there's an area where you can you can observe all the enemies you fought in the game. For some strange reason, sometimes the enemies will just be in a T-pose position, and I don't know why, but they're just like that. They just walk around completely in a T-pose position. It doesn't break the game. It was very odd when I first saw it, because I was a kid. I'm like, what's going on? This is very weird. But it didn't do anything to impact the game. Like, it definitely wasn't a combat scenario, so that was fine. So it's something that can be ignored. I think that if it is something like that in the Spider-Man games or any other games, that's fine, you can ignore it. But if it's something that is like in Arkham Origins, where you crash through the world and you can't make any progress in the game, that's something that definitely should be called out. Sure, if your game also is going to do something like Ubisoft games, where textures just constantly disappear off of characters, like,
You just have floating eyes and a floating mouth. That's it. Oh, did I lose you? Oh, of course my internet died. Alright. My internet keeps, like, going out for a second and then coming back on. And, yeah, I think we can just, try moving on.
yeah.
Well, anyway. So, I'll go ahead and express my thoughts now, because at least that'll get recorded. So even if I lose you, I'll be able to get that on, and then hopefully we'll just be able to finish this thing out. But basically, kind of the only thing I really want to add to what I've already said is, I think that there is too much of a focus on trying to find bugs in the opposing consoles' games. I think that both sides need to get a life, need to get another hobby, need to find Jesus. Whatever it is that they need to do, they need to stop obsessing over this. Now, that all being said, I also think that the biggest reason why this stands out, these bugs and glitches stand out so much with this Spider-Man 2 game, is number one, because it's really Sony's only first-party game they've released this year. And two, because of the fact that usually Insomniac games are really polished. And then, of course, the fact that these things didn't even come out in reviews. So I do think that it seems very possible that all these glitches and everything came up as a result of the day one patch. That is very possible. I've seen enough examples of games, especially like Destiny 2, which is a game that, has had updates lots and lots throughout the years, and sometimes those updates have broken certain things about the game, have messed things up. That could very well be the reason why these bugs popped up, and I'm sure Insomniac is going to get them fixed. I think as a developer, I have enough faith in them, having seen the quality of their games in general. But even still, I think that, I think PlayStation fanboys need to be honest when they come across these glitches and say, hey, these things are coming up. I've talked to a bunch of guys who are currently playing the game, and some of them are more on the fanboy side, but most of them are just fans of PlayStation, and some of them have had glitches like this. I don't know if anyone's had the tofu cube glitch, but definitely like disappearing stuff and occasionally other issues. Glitches can be a problem, though. As an example, I got Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate on 3DS, and I got to a certain point, I think it was after the fight against Penguin, probably, where I reached a game-breaking glitch where I literally couldn't proceed. Not the game wouldn't freeze up. I was stuck in an area. There was no way to get out. And at the time, I was still using Twitter because this was many years ago. And I tweeted the developer and said, "Hey, were you guys able to release a patch for this? Because apparently it was a problem that they did know existed, but they didn't. It was a while after." And it's like, no, well, for one, it was a while after the game had come out, at least a couple years, if not 3 or 4 years. But two, they basically had funding pulled before they could actually fix the game. So the developer was really cool, though. Shout out to this developer. I don't remember let me grab the case just 1 second.
Armature? I think is it Armature?
Yes, Armature. That's right. Yes, Armature. So what they did is they played the game to get back to the point where I left off. They found out, everything that I had done in the game, and they sent me a free copy with past that point, and I was able to finish the game. Play the rest of the game, and I finished it. So, shout out to Armature Studios for being cool enough to do that, when there was a game-breaking glitch with their game, because I didn't want to start over from scratch. That would have been frustrating. But yeah, that was super helpful. I think that basically, I told them, you don't need to worry about getting necessarily all the collectibles and stuff that I had before, because it's going to be kind of a pain to get all those, and I'm happy to do those again. I just didn't want to have to redo all of the progression aspects of it. So, redo getting all the gadgets and whatnot. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that this whole thing it's more overblown than it should be. And it really just comes down to that there are Xbox fanboys, and, don't think Xbox fanboys that you get away with it when you are being fanboys. I rag on the PlayStation people quite a bit because they're sometimes the worst, but you Xbox fanboys can be just as bad sometimes, and right now I think this is a great example of you being just as bad. But also, admit, it's Starfield has plenty of bugs too. It does, just like basically every Bethesda game. I think it's less buggy than some of the Bethesda games, but I've had glitches people who I needed to talk to that were below the floor, or textures of a person's head disappearing who was wearing gear that makes them invisible, but it was just their head that had disappeared. Things like that. It's up. Yeah. Anyway. Let's end it here. All right. So, any final thoughts before we move on into our recommendations and dissuasions?
Nope. I think I'm ready to jump right into it.
All right. Well, go ahead and give yours.
All right. So my recommendation is to that's my. Oh gosh. I'm sorry. I just thought about it. I was like I almost switched both my recommendation and my dissuasion around. So let me correct that right now. Okay. And so my recommendation actually is for people who have a Steam Deck. Download and use Proton QT. That is what is going to allow you to actually play games.
Is Proton QT, is that just the updater Or
It's the updater. It's like the third-party one that lets you use the community Proton versions,
okay,
and that is what will allow you to use versions of Proton to play games that aren't supported, that aren't listed as supported
okay,
or verified games. So, like for example, Batman Arkham City is the only game that is at least playable. The other ones are not supported at all, but using the native or the standard Proton versions that you can use on the Steam Deck. But using Proton QT, you can play Arkham Asylum, you can play Arkham Origins, you can play Arkham Knight on the Steam Deck. And in fact, that's something that I meant to do because I heard that this was a method that people used to play those games and other games on the Steam Deck. So basically, after I did that, I was able to play Arkham Asylum and continue on from where I left off at on PC, just because I was still trying to get collectibles and stuff, and it worked. And that will actually pretty much apply to other games as well. And I think the best way to know what games it'll work for is pretty much to use Proton DB. And if there's a game that works well on Linux desktop and it has like using that Proton QT, it should work on the Steam Deck as well. So if a game is working on desktop Linux with Proton QT or some other fix, then that should still apply as well, because it's using the same version. The versions of the links will be different, but in theory, it should still work and translate over for what you'll get. So use Proton DB to see which versions you'll need, and download Proton QT to just like get those versions and get the community versions to work for those games.
gotcha. I do want to note real quick. Arkham Asylum actually works fine with Proton Experimental. And
Okay.
Arkham Knight, I can't remember which one I used for that, but I didn't have Proton QT. I don't know, but yeah, I got Arkham Knight working. I didn't really have any issues with running any of them. I didn't try Origins. I can't remember if I tried Origins Blackgate, but yeah,
I think Blackgate, that one actually is verified.
that's right. You're right. It is.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, Asylum works fine without it. I haven't tried to see if there's a way to skip past the launcher thing, but once I got past the launcher, it started no problem. 60 frames per second, highest settings, all that. Great. All right, for my recommendation this week, I am going to kind of hard to choose between the two that I want to recommend. So I think that I'm gonna say I'm gonna give technically two recommendations, but one is if you like 2D games, and one is if you don't. So, if you like 2D games, play Unsold. You can get it on Switch, you can get it on PC. It's probably on the other platforms, I would guess, but it is a fantastic game. Well worth your time, and it's not a long game, which is one of the great things. And if you don't like playing a difficult game with that, you can very easily just put it down to the easiest difficulty, which there's only 3 difficulties levels, and it's not that difficult. It's pretty easy to get through, and it's fun. But if you don't like 2D games, I'm going to recommend Ghost Runner 2. I would recommend that one in general because it's fantastic, and Bear Stuff Bark. Oh, he's... Never mind. Sorry, my dog's sneezing. I thought he was barking because I'm going to go like... Oof, oof. But anyway, yeah, Ghost Runner 2. Fantastic. I loved the first game, and the second one, from the few hours I've played so far, has been fantastic as well. So, highly, highly recommend it. And your dissuasion?
My dissuasion is to, and this is going to be kind of vague, I guess, maybe I'll be a bit more specific, but is to not let your rests be your new norm. And by that I mean, if you're doing something, and whether something that you're doing as a goal you're working toward, or just something that you do that you enjoy, And say, for example, you need to take some time off, or something happens in life and you need to take a break from it. Don't let that break become the new norm that you start making excuses as to why you don't get back into doing what it was you were doing before.
Gotcha.
That's definitely something that has happened with me. Primarily just like doing something like exercising, for example. Say I have a long day at work and I feel tired when I get back home, which I normally exercise in the evenings. Because of that, I might take the day off. But if I sort of like do that for a couple days, then I might say, okay, I'll do it the next day, and I just don't get back into it. So that's something that I sort of try to work hard to like not getting into that. Okay, I'll push it off into the next day, and I just don't get back into that. So something like that. Like I said, life happens. Something might happen where you need to take a break from whatever it is you're doing, but try to get back into it. Don't let what you're doing just die off.
It's good advice. So my dissuasion is going to be, if you are in a position where you aren't necessarily able to provide money to someone, or give, or you're not necessarily wanting to be there for like the whole thing. Like when someone's doing a 24-hour live stream, for instance, don't just not show up at all. Like, I get it. If you can't donate, like especially particularly, obviously I'm referring to my upcoming 24-hour live stream. If you can't donate, don't feel like you have to. Don't feel like you can't stop by because you can't stick around for very long. And even if you don't necessarily enjoy watching the game, you can still stop by and just say hi. Especially if you're someone who's up in the middle of the night, because you stay up really late, or you are a very early riser, stop by. Just say hi. It's really helpful, not just to me, but to anyone who's doing these 24-hour live streams. And we're getting to the point when there's going to be people doing these stack-up streams. Extra Life Day is next weekend. I believe it's November 3rd or 4th is Extra Life Day. There's going to be a lot of people doing these 24-hour streams. Help them out. It really does show support, even if you can't donate anything. Just stopping by and saying hi, and talking to them a little bit. Sometimes the view counts are not going to be the easiest to tell, especially if you're watching through the Extra Life or Stack Up site rather than directly on YouTube. But if you are there, say something, please, because not all of us have a bunch of people watching. I certainly don't, and it's very helpful to me when I have anyone just commenting, saying hi, seeing how I'm doing, whatever, even if you can't donate. But of course, if you can donate, please do. So that was kind of a combination recommendation and dissuasion, so I sort of cheated. All right. So where can people find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel. I am Xeracon. That is IAMXERACON. And if you want to do that weird thing that YouTube does, the handle is @IamXeracon.
All right, and you can find me. My YouTube channel is TheFrozenGamer87. So YouTube.com/@TheFrozenGamer87. I don't put out a ton of content, but I am going to be doing a 24-hour live stream raising money for the Stack Up charity, which provides games basically as a means to help veterans get the help they need, particularly those who are suffering from PTSD. And they do a variety of different things related to video games, helping to build community and helping to connect veterans with other veterans and just with people who can help them in getting through these difficult times, especially readjusting to civilian life. It's a great charity. Please, if you can, stop by. If you can donate, that's even more appreciated. My goal this year is to hopefully actually get up to $300 for my funds raised. That's not that high of a goal. Even if you can only give a couple dollars, $5, whatever, every little bit helps. And I've donated to it. Justin has donated to it. And anybody else who's willing to, that'd be great. And like I said, even if you can't stop by, even if you can't donate, please stop by, say hi anytime you have available. I'll be starting at 9 a.m. Central Time, Friday morning, October 27th. So by the time this podcast comes out, I will probably be live. Well, more or less anyway. It'll probably be a couple hours after I go, or a couple hours before I go live, that the podcast will be live. It'll be on YouTube as well as Google Podcasts. Now it is up there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, a bunch of different podcast services. So you can find it just about anywhere. And please stop by. Help out with that live stream and help me get to my goal. And remember that all these funds go directly to Stack Up. I don't see a dime of this. I'm not doing this for my own money. I'm doing it just to raise money for a great charity. So, with all that being said, I am once again the Frozen Gamer 87. That is, I am Zeracon. And may you never get the black lung. Orangebox Podcast out.